Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds, everyone. So glad on this episode to be talking with writer creator Dara Naraghi. Dara, thank you for jumping in, joining, and thank you also for the lovely Batman Bank, the art that's behind you, the Kermit. I'm loving the ambiance. It looks like maybe some bone back there as well. So lots of
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful things.
Well, thank you. No, I really appreciate you having me on.
My pleasure. Thanks for saying yes. Yeah. I usually start by mentioning a couple of titles, and so I'll run through just a few here. You've written and worked in the world of properties like Ghostbusters and Terminator, and the James Patterson universe
Mhm.
as well. So some good questions and conversation there. Being a former middle school teacher, current high school teacher, and you've also worked on Persia Blues, and I wrote these down to make sure that I got all of them right, as well as some work in adapting comics and film with Igor as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure that I missed some titles there, but I hope I hit several that have good memories and experiences for you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you definitely touched on all the highlights.
Great, great, great. So I'm curious, by means of an opening question, what it is about comics and sort of the world of visual storytelling that has captured your interest.
I suspect it's kind of the same story with a lot of other huge comic fans and creators. I grew up with them. Um,
Mhm.
my story is maybe a little bit different. So I was born in Iran, and I was, I kind of spent my childhood there. So the comics that I had access to were not so much like Western superhero stuff, but it was mostly like European comics, mainly Tintin,
Mhm.
which is, pretty huge all over the world, um, with the exception of the US maybe. But yeah, I remember like reading, they had them translated in Persian, but I also had some English versions and some French versions. And this is before I could even read. But the great thing about comics, at least the ones that are done really well, is you can follow the story even if you can't really read the word balloons. So
Mhm.
yeah, I kind of grew up with that. At some point when I was a kid, I don't know through who, maybe an uncle or a cousin or someone, I got my hands on some American superhero comics, which I thought were pretty cool. But like it didn't really click with me until we moved to the US and I first discovered like those old spinner racks at like mom and pop grocery stores or pharmacies or whatever, and saw all these, Superman and Batman and Spider-Man and all that stuff. And then eventually discovering comic book stores. But yeah, I mean, from early childhood, I loved the whole medium and just, I still do.
Love it, love it. Yeah, I'm curious about within the medium, then the kind of process that you go through in writing and where you feel like you kind of connect best and what gets you thriving in writing.
Mhm. Um, yeah, probably in terms of like the subjects that interest me, it's kind of two distinct areas, and then sometimes I kind of melt the two. So, I grew up on all sorts of genre fiction. I was a huge fantasy buff. I played D&D, when I was younger,
Mhm.
science fiction, all that stuff. So any kind of genre story I really enjoy. I've tried my hand, even at the stuff that maybe isn't like huge on my list, like horror. It's still, I've done like a few horror short stories because it's kind of fun.
Mhm.
The other
Mhm.
area is like sort of just slice of life type stories. I've done, some autobiographical shorts, and just, some other shorts that are, I guess you would consider it slice of life. And every once in a while, I try to find a project where I can kind of, melt the two together, where it may be, some kind of a genre thing, but there's definitely a huge emphasis on the characters and maybe not so much the fantastical aspects
Mhm.
of the story. So yeah, those are the areas that I kind of, that's like my sweet spot.
Yeah, is Lifeline, is that the title that I'm thinking of?
Yeah, lifelike. Yeah.
Lifelike, sorry, Lifelike.
Oh,
I knew
no.
it was something similar. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of started for me wanting to do a web comic. But when you're a beginner creator, especially a writer, you don't really have a whole lot of credits to your name. it's kind of hard to find collaborators, especially if you're trying to do some big epic thing. So
Mhm.
I thought, well, starting with short stories, since that I'd done a lot of those with like zines and self-published comics, I thought that would be a good way to go. So yeah, I just started writing all these short sort of slice of life stories and work with different artists and put them online. And eventually, had enough to kind of pitch it to some publishers to see if they wanted to print a collected edition of it. And that's how I ended up at IDW.
Nice, nice. Very cool. Very cool. I love how one part of the journey leads to another part of the journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, I think everyone's career is like that. They're all stepping stones, but there's definitely things that I planned to do that never worked out, and then stuff that I wasn't even on my radar, and it just, sort of happened, just like you said, because one step led to another, and you make connections and you meet people, and yeah, things kind of fall into place.
Yeah. Yeah. Curious about that process of adaptation too. That's always something that interests me, whether it's working with something that's a film property or, as I mentioned, the James Patterson Wizard books that you've worked on as well. So what's that been like?
My experience has been really good. Now I know like a lot of other creators, talk about like just the multiple levels of approval that they have to go to and like,
Hmm.
all the notes and all that stuff. I was pretty fortunate with the few projects that I did where for the most part it was me and my editor at IDW. And then, obviously I would have to run it by whoever the property owner was for approval. But I never really got a lot of notes or pushback or you can't do this, or you got to change this. So
Hmm.
yeah, I consider myself pretty fortunate, but it is a little bit, it takes a little bit longer just because you kind of have to wait for all those different levels and different eyes to look at it and give the thumbs up before you can proceed.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure, and uh, pleasing different folks along the way. I'm sure it is part of it as well.
Yeah. Now, having said that, I actually really enjoyed it because in a weird way, there's a lot of freedom in the constraints that they put around you.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because if you're like, if you're working on something completely original, especially like, when I've done stuff that's my own, getting started is so difficult because you're essentially looking at a blank screen and there's infinite possibilities of what you can do. But
Yeah.
when it's an established, property, character, IP, whatever you want to call it, there's already stories that came, before, there's already guardrails in place where this is the type of mood and atmosphere that they're going for. These are the things that, these characters can do. And
Hmm.
since all of that's already established, in a way, it kind of like frees your mind not to worry about any of that. And then you just have to kind of think of, what kind of story can I tell within these boundaries? Which I know some folks probably don't like it. And I do like, doing both. I love doing my own self-published and creator controlled stuff. But one of the joys of working on things like Ghostbusters or Terminator is, there's already that mythology built up, and then you get to have fun with it, and then kind of add a little piece to it
Hmm.
from your own stuff.
But I also love the range there from sort of more animated or kid-friendly properties to something that's more mature. So enjoy that as well about your work.
Yeah, thank you.
Hmm.
I think you mentioned the Igor movie, so that was an animated, I think PG movie, very
Yeah.
kid friendly, obviously. So I had the opportunity to do a movie prequel. So I was doing all original stories with those characters that kind of took place prior to the movie.
Hmm.
I think at the same time I was working on that, I can't remember if there was a zombie series I was writing or some other property that was definitely the complete opposite. So it was interesting to try to like, context switch my mind between like, okay, now I'm working on Igor and then now I'm working on this really ultraviolet thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun and it keeps things interesting.
A range of authoring hats. You almost have
Oh
to put
yeah,
on
for
a
sure.
different hat each time.
Yeah.
I also love what you said there about the infinite possibilities of the blank page, which is, on one hand, intimidating for sure,
Mhm.
I'm sure, but on the other hand, also incredibly exciting to be able to take a story in essentially whatever direction you want to go as well.
Yeah. So the Persia Blues graphic novels that you mentioned,
Yeah.
it's planned as a trilogy. I'm super behind on the third volume, but two volumes are out, but that was something that was, I built from the ground up. Um, I have a friend that lives here in Columbus, and we, have known each other for quite a while, and we were in the same writer artist collective for a while. So
Hmm.
I partnered with him. His name is Brent Bowman, so he did the artwork for it, and that was just a joy to not only build it from the ground up and come up with the characters and concepts and story and all that stuff, but to be able to like sit down with him in person, get together, my house, his house, coffee shop, whatever, and then work through some of the stuff, through the early character designs, through roughs, through the pages, all that kind of stuff. There's
Yeah.
definitely a rush and a joy that comes from doing something completely, new and original and your own. And to be able to do it with somebody that's a good friend and that, is not someone you're just talking through email or FaceTiming with, but like you can actually get together and look through stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of that kind of collaboration, I
Mhm.
generally ask about those experiences that have been most positive in collaborations and some of those milestones. Anything that we haven't touched there that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, so the Brent thing. So on the Witch and Wizard books, the artist that I worked with, his name is Victor Santos.
Hmm.
He lives in Spain. So, that was a case where, I had no input on the artist or anything. I provided the script and then IDW, matched an artist to it. And you never know, especially working on, I corporate IP kind of stuff. You don't really have a whole lot of say. Obviously it's more the editor and the publishers are in charge.
Hmm.
But when I first saw his work, I was blown away. And then we worked so well together. The pages would come in and it was not just what I had written or imagined, but it was way better. That it like motivated me to write to his strengths. And I
Yeah.
think that was the first time that I actually quite understood what that even meant because I had read dozens of interviews, right, with especially with writers where they're like, oh, I like to write to my artist's strength. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, you're still telling your story, right? You're not changing it just because your artist likes to draw a dinosaur or muscle cars or whatever. But working with Victor was like where it clicked for me because he would do these really interesting page layouts where like I remember writing a scene where one of the characters jumps out of the window of like a high rise and there's broken glass and he drew all the panels as the broken pieces of glass with the action in it. So that that really got me thinking for like future issues to like provide him with more opportunities like that where he could do really cool stuff. So that was a
Yeah.
great collaboration. And we liked working together so much. I ended up doing a couple of short autobiographical comics for Dark Horse Presents, and I asked if he would, work with me on those, and he did. And yeah, it was just a joy.
Yeah. Lovely. Lovely.
Yeah.
So by means of a closing question, I know it's a brief format, so we can certainly hit anything that we might have missed, but um, curious about what is happening now and future creative steps that you can talk about, as well as spaces where people can learn more.
Sure. So I really haven't been that active in the comics field for almost a decade. I got to a point where I was just kind of burning the candle at both ends with my day job and then the freelance writing, and it just got too much. And, I kind of got burned out, and other stuff that was going on in my life. So I'm kind of slowly getting back into it.
Hmm.
In terms of what I've got coming up, so again, with my friend Brent Bowman, who worked on Persia Blues, we're putting together just kind of a fun, old school sword and sorcery comic.
Love
That
it.
it's just going to be basically the two of us having fun, and we're going to self-publish it ourselves. Um, One of these days, I'm going to have to, really get my butt into gear and finish the third volume of Persia Blues because he's dying to read, to draw it and finish it, and so am I. But I've just kind of had a block that I've been trying to work through.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, I mean that's kind of it for now. I do short stories here and there, things that pop up, maybe an anthology or something. Um, in terms of like where to find me, I have a website that there's not a whole lot on there, but there's the basic info. It's just my name, daranaraghi.com.
Hmm.
So folks can find me there. I'm also on Facebook, so if people are interested, they can look for me there.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, sending all the warm vibes for the block to melt and the story to come together. And
Appreciate it.
yeah, yeah, curious to hear more about the creator-owned work you're doing in Sword and Sorcery. So, looking forward to seeing and hearing more about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll let you know once we're a little bit closer to having something we can show off.
Yeah, yeah, that would be great. That would be wonderful. Yeah. Well, Dara, thank you so much for the time. Did we miss anything that you want to make sure to share before we go?
Um, no, I think we touched on a lot of the big things, but yeah, again, I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for jumping on and being part of the podcast, and glad to talk again in the future.
Sure thing. Thanks.